Imagine waking up in a world where an invisible enemy silently charts its course, threatening to cross borders we never imagined. In the United States, the number of H5N1 avian flu cases is growing at an alarming rate. In Canada, a teenager is in critical condition, despite having no direct contact with infected animals. Could this be the beginning of a new pandemic? While science searches for answers, warning signs continue to mount. How is this virus, once thought to be confined to birds, now affecting mammals and humans? More importantly, what does this mean for our lives and the future of our world? Today, we're going to dive deep into a story that's as fascinating as it is unsettling. Get ready to uncover how H5N1 might be leading us to a global turning point. Are you ready to face the truth? Stick with me until the end, because what you're about to hear might change the way you think about pandemics forever. To understand the threat H5N1 poses today, we need to look at the past. The world has already faced devastating pandemics caused by influenza viruses, and these crises have taught us valuable lessons. In 1918, an H1N1 influenza virus, likely originating from birds, caused the Spanish flu pandemic, leaving more than 50 million dead in its wake. Decades later, in 1957, H2N2, a virus of avian origin, sparked a pandemic that began in Asia and spread globally, claiming 1.1 million lives. By 1968, H3N2 emerged in Hong Kong, resulting in about 1 million deaths. More recently, in 2009, H1N1 returned, this time originating from pigs, triggering another pandemic that killed at least 150,000 people. These numbers aren't just history, they are stark reminders of the destructive potential of influenza viruses and what can happen when they follow a specific path. And this path is already well understood by science. For an influenza virus to reach pandemic status, it must meet three main conditions. First, it must be capable of infecting non-human animals, such as birds, pigs, or even cattle. Second, it must be able to jump from those animals to humans. Finally, and perhaps most alarmingly, it must acquire the ability to spread efficiently from person to person. Every time we've faced an influenza pandemic, these steps have been followed. Now the big question is, where does H5N1 stand in this process? Let's explore this together, because the answers may be critical to what lies ahead. The story of H5N1 begins in 1996, when it was first detected in domestic geese in China. For scientists at the time, this was a worrying alert. It wasn't just another avian flu virus, it was a new combination, the result of mutations that made it unlike anything seen before, and that difference was alarming. H5N1 quickly stood out among other avian flu viruses due to its devastating potential. Highly pathogenic, it not only spread easily, but also had the capability to decimate entire flocks of birds in a matter of days. The economic losses for farmers were enormous, but the real shock was yet to come. Less than a year later, in 1997, H5N1 made a leap no one expected. It was identified in humans for the first time during an outbreak among poultry farmers in Hong Kong. The toll was frightening. 18 people were infected and 6 died. For the first time, the world realized that this virus could represent a much larger threat than anyone had anticipated, and it was at this moment that H5N1 stopped being just a problem for birds and became a global concern. After the initial outbreak in 1997, H5N1 seemed to retreat, almost like a predator hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again. In 2003, it re-emerged, detected in wild birds and causing human outbreaks in 8 Asian countries. Once again, the scientific community was on high alert. But what made this resurgence even more troubling was its alarming lethality. Over 50% of infected individuals did not survive. By the end of 2019, 861 human cases had been confirmed across 17 countries, resulting in 455 deaths. And then, in 2020, it began breaking new barriers. Likely carried by migratory birds, H5N1 started appearing in European countries, crossing oceans and borders, but it didn't stop at birds. It adapted, making its way into the world of mammals. Foxes, seals, sea lions, and even bears were found infected. This wasn't just a biological milestone, it was a clear signal that the virus was gaining ground, becoming more versatile and resilient. Then came 2023, bringing with it a new and alarming chapter. In Peru, around 600 sea lions were found dead, victims of H5N1. This was a turning point. A mutation in the virus had enabled it to infect mammals more effectively, and if it can infect a wild mammal, what's stopping it from spreading even more easily among us humans? H5N1 had already met 2 of the 3 steps needed to trigger a pandemic. It could infect birds and mammals, including humans, and it had adapted to survive in our bodies. Only one element remained to complete the cycle: efficient human-to-human transmission. But in 2024, something changed, and the situation became even more alarming. Early in the year, the virus was identified in cattle in the United States, an unprecedented event. For the first time, H5N1 crossed the barrier from birds and wild mammals to infect one of the animals most closely tied to our food and economic systems. The situation quickly worsened. As of the recording of this video, 508 farms across 15 US states have reported outbreaks of the virus. 52 people have been infected, with at least one case involving no direct contact with contaminated animals. And in Canada, another case shocked experts. A teenager with no known exposure to birds or cattle is in critical condition. How is this possible? Analysis revealed that the virus in this teenager had undergone specific mutations that made it easier to transmit between humans. We're no longer talking about a hypothetical threat. H5N1 is changing, adapting, and breaking down the barriers that once contained it. The question now is clear. Has the virus already met the 3rd criterion? Are we on the brink of a new pandemic? Governments and scientists are on high alert. The World Health Organization has intensified calls for strict surveillance of birds, mammals, and humans, while countries like the United Kingdom have stockpiled millions of vaccines, specifically for H5N1, preparing for the worst. In light of H5N1's progression, experts have outlined 3 possible scenarios: optimistic, intermediate, and pessimistic. Let's explore each one to better understand the potential trajectories of this virus. In the optimistic scenario, H5N1 remains unable to efficiently transmit between humans. Current cases would be similar to previous outbreaks, where infections occurred primarily through direct contact with infected birds or mammals. For example, infections among cattle farmers could be attributed to prolonged exposure to animals, a known zoonotic transmission pathway. In cases where no direct contact with animals has been reported, exposure might have occurred indirectly, such as through contaminated surfaces or products from affected farms. One point supporting this perspective is the absence of symptoms in close family members of infected individuals, as seen in the case of the Canadian teenager. If H5N1 had acquired the ability for sustained human-to-human transmission, we would expect larger outbreaks, especially among close contacts. So far, this has not been observed, suggesting the virus has not yet evolved into a form that can easily spread among people. In the most alarming scenario, H5N1 would have developed mutations enabling efficient human-to-human transmission. The identification of human cases with no known exposure to infected animals raises concerns about undetected infections and potential silent spread. This situation is reminiscent of the early days of the 2009 H1N1 pandemic, when isolated cases with no apparent connection preceded a global spread. The possibility of sustained human-to-human transmission is a significant concern, given H5N1's high fatality rate. In this context, rigorous surveillance and control measures would be critical to preventing a large-scale pandemic. The intermediate scenario suggests that while H5N1 is not yet transmitting between humans, it is adapting rapidly. Infections in mammals, such as cattle, indicate that the virus is broadening its host range, increasing opportunities for human exposure. This proximity raises the risk that H5N1 may eventually acquire the ability to transmit between people. As the US approaches winter, a time when seasonal flu viruses thrive, the situation becomes even more delicate. This year, H5N1, which has already demonstrated its ability to infect mammals like cattle, is circulating alongside the common human flu. This proximity introduces a potentially devastating risk: genetic reassortment. Imagine this: 2 different viruses, the human flu and H5N1, meeting inside the body of someone infected with both. They exchange pieces of genetic material, and from this encounter, a new virus could emerge. a virus that combines the high transmissibility of the human flu with the terrifying lethality of H5N1. Sounds like science fiction? Unfortunately, it's a process well known to scientists, and one that has been responsible for past pandemics, such as those in 1957 and 1968. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC in the United States, currently classifies the risk to public health as low, but experts warn that this is precisely the type of scenario where preparation and vigilance make all the difference. Because if genetic reassortment occurs, we could be facing a virus with pandemic potential, one for which the global population would have little to no immunity. This is the kind of threat we cannot afford to underestimate. At the same time, it serves as a reminder of the importance of science and global collaboration. Governments and international organizations are bolstering monitoring systems, while scientists worldwide work tirelessly to understand and predict H5N1's next moves. Now picture this: every farm, market, and wild bird in the United States and Europe being closely monitored. This is the level of vigilance required right now. H5N1 is under the watchful eyes of experts, and while the CDC currently assures that the risk to the public remains low, history has shown us the dangers of underestimating a virus with this kind of potential. Governments are taking action, creating a robust shield to contain H5N1's advance. They are tightening biosecurity measures on farms, vaccinating poultry in some regions, and maintaining strict oversight in farms and natural habitats. In Europe, campaigns to vaccinate birds are already being discussed, while the United Kingdom has stockpiled millions of doses of human-specific vaccines ready to deploy in case of an emergency. In the United States, preparations are following a similar path, with experts exploring strategies to ensure rapid responses. But what can you do to protect yourself? The answer is simple. Get vaccinated against the common flu. That's right. While this vaccine isn't specifically designed for H5N1, it offers two critical benefits. First, it may help your body produce antibodies that, at least partially, combat H5N1. Second, it reduces the chances of the human flu virus being present in your body, lowering the risk of that dangerous genetic reassortment between H5N1 and seasonal flu. In addition, it's vital to follow other preventive measures, avoid contact with sick birds, ensure poultry and eggs are thoroughly cooked, and maintain rigorous hygiene by washing your hands regularly. If you notice anything unusual, such as sick birds or unexplained deaths in your area, report it immediately to health authorities. Now, while the situation in public health may seem under control for now, the economy tells a very different story. Imagine the effects of an outbreak that, even if restricted to animals, is shaking global markets and putting the food security of millions at risk. In 2023, the United States faced one of the worst avian flu outbreaks in its history. The price of a dozen eggs soared from $1.50 to a staggering $5 in just 1 year, and this impact isn't limited to the United States. In Australia, egg prices nearly doubled in 2024. In Europe, the situation is equally alarming. Countries like Austria, France, and Poland are on high alert, with 1.7 million birds either dead or culled globally in October 2024 alone. These numbers aren't just statistics. They are signs of a weakened food supply chain and markets under significant pressure, and it doesn't stop there. If the outbreak continues, even if limited to animals, the prices of meat, milk, and eggs could rise further, jeopardizing access to basic foods. For public health officials, the challenge is equally monumental. In the United States, the CDC have ramped up testing in animals, humans, and even wastewater to trace and contain the virus's spread. This strategy is critical, as wastewater can detect the genetic material of H5N1 even before clinical cases appear. What makes this approach so crucial is that we're not just fighting a virus, we're confronting a threat to global food security. In the United States, as one of the world's largest producers of meat and eggs, vigilance is strict, but it must go further. Animal farmers and health professionals must remain alert, ready to act at the first signs of H5N1 advancing. If this video brought you value, please share it with your friends and family. This helps spread reliable information to more people and builds a network of awareness that can make a real difference. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It's a small action, but it goes a long way in supporting our work. You can also support the channel in other ways. If you're able, consider making a donation of any amount on our Ko-fi page. Every contribution helps maintain the quality of research and the effort needed to produce content like this. And if you're planning to shop on Amazon, be sure to click on one of our links in the description first. It costs you nothing extra, but it directly supports us. Together we can build a more informed and resilient community. Thank you for watching, for supporting, and for being part of this journey. See you in the next video.